At $25,000, where do you find your lightweight, affordable, rear-wheel drive car? It's always been Miata or nothing. Except that now, it's not Miata or nothing.
These days you do have an option, and of course it's the FRS or BRZ that are also rear-wheel drive, $25,000 lightweight focused sports cars.
Well, this is it. This is the car we've been waiting to share with you guys. You've been waiting for us to review it. Finally, here we are.
In the 2016 latest generation Mazda Miata, the 4th generation.
It's the launch edition. It's the 6-speed manual.
Every car is more fun with the top down. So we've left it up for this shoot so that we can more directly compare just driving sensations and not kind of be fooled by, hey, I've got the whole world around me, like you can in any convertible.
And we're back in the FRS. If you are shopping for these cars, or any cars for that matter, just like what we do on the podcast, we recommend that you take a day and drive cars back to back because it is so hugely entertaining and informative.
Okay, right away, I have to acknowledge this is not just some FRS. This is my FRS. This is our long-term car for the show. It is at the moment still stock with the exception of the wheels and tires. There's a striking difference between these two cars. The minute you get from one into the other, the differences are kind of glaring.
A lot of people have thought this is sort of the second coming. I mean, the Recipe, one of the most successful sports cars of all time.
25 years worth, almost 1 million cars at this point. The most successful convertible in history. I mean, on and on the list goes. Surprisingly, this 4th generation has done something that cars just don't do anymore, and that is it's gotten smaller and lighter.
It had to be crisper and had to be a clean shape. Because this car is so small, you can't be too busy on such a small car like this. It's very stylish, looks great. The styling has grown on me. I thought that the taillights and the headlights were just pinched and too narrow, but it works. Mazda left the slabs, these big surfaces open, and they had to on such a small car. And I'm glad they didn't go bigger. We wouldn't have liked it if it had been any bigger than this.
Now, I actually have grown to like the FRS styling the more I've looked at it, and now that I've got wheels I like on it, I like the look of this car even more than I thought I would. But I do have to say, that Miata is the best looking Miata ever. It's actually got some aggression it's never had before, while feeling like it is a direct reference to the 1st generation.
This interior, as busy as it is and as detailed as it is, it's perfectly symmetrical, and you're aligned with the car.
To my great surprise, you have a smaller cabin than the NC, but I feel like it's just as roomy. Now, the Miata has come a long way in interior materials. This has got a nice nav screen. It's the same one they're putting in all of their products. Everything looks higher class than it has in other Miatas. Anything you'd look for in a modern interior is found in this tiny little package.
It feels a little bit above its pay grade. Classic layout, like a purposeful analog car. Even though it's got an electric rack, even though there's much about it that is new and improved, it still feels like Mazda's trying to pay attention to its roots and where this car came from.
I mean, there's not a lot of extra room. Yes, my head is barely touching the ceiling. If I were wearing a helmet, it would be pressing up against the cloth. I actually think the Miata has the better interior of these two cars, even though the FRS has the better seats and the better seating position. I don't like this stick shift as much as I do the one in the FRS. In spite of the fact that by modern gearbox standards this is really good and it is kind of a short shifter feel, it doesn't feel as positive as the one in the FRS.
Porsches to the FRS to the Honda S2000, there's a lot of good ones out there, and this is up there with the best of them. It feels solid, and just like in every prior car.
Neither of these cars are fast, but in fact, the MX5 is actually a little bit quicker. This has got Mazda's 2-liter Sky Active 4-cylinder in it, putting out the same 155 horsepower that it does in pretty much every other usage. It's a very willing engine. It gets good gas mileage. I mean, it does all the things that a modern engine is supposed to do, and Mazda uses it kind of across their product range. So it finds itself here in the MX5, luckily pushing less car around.
So 155 horsepower, is it enough? the big question. I want it to be. It's okay. I've been so mixed about FRS power. I've been so back and forth around it. And I'm kind of doing the same thing here. You want to keep your momentum. If you slow down, you're kind of cooked. Because the power just, you want more. You want more.
As soon as I got in this car, two things struck me right away. The first one was the amount of softness in most of the controls. It's not a bad thing, everything does exactly what you're telling it, but there is just a general kind of sponginess. It's not hardcore at all in any of the inputs. The steering is incredibly light. In fact, the steering is a little too light for my tastes. And it's also a slower steering rack than the one in the FRS. So you add a really light steering feel and a little bit less quickness, and that makes it feel a little slower to respond than the FRS. It doesn't feel quite as exact and instantaneous. Compared to most cars, this is so flyweight that the response feels subconscious.
It's good. I'm smiling, I'm liking, and I'm wanting the car to feel sharper and more dynamic right there. Did you see that right at the apex, digging in? I wanted to feel something more. But there's a softness to it. There's a compliance, there's a giving. It's like you've got to learn to drive the car differently. It feels like it tracks, but it's not giving me that surprise and delight. You know, wow, I didn't know it could do that. I didn't know it could hang on like that. I didn't know it was a surprise. It was great. No, it's good. It's good.
There's no question this FRS feels like a larger car than the Miata. The surprising thing, though, is the dynamics here actually feel a lot more defined and sharper than they do in almost every way in the MX-5. This more aggressive tire setup does create a different sensation in the FRS. We have a BRZ with us as well. We wanted to bring something stock just for comparison.
Even with those original tires on it, it feels so far more planted than the MX-5. The structural rigidity of this car is coming into play. It is definitely helping this car. But I feel like I can feel all these things adding up to a tighter driving experience. You would have to spend more money making the MX-5 a better driver's car than you would the FRS.
In spite of the Miata's track history and the fact that the new one, of course, will be tracked just as much as all the other generations, the initial sense when you first sit down is that, oh, I want to take this FRS to the track. That instantly strikes you. The Miata, you think, well, it's well balanced, it'll probably be fine at the track. If you didn't know the history of the Miata, you wouldn't instantly think track car when you drop into it, especially not compared to the way this feels in its stock setup.
The suspension is soft. Yes, you're going to want to stiffen things up if you want more out of it. But I'm feeling like Mazda engineers have really tried to strike a balance between comfort and what a lot of the market will buy this car for, and that's cruising, road trips, honestly.
I can't get over how light this car feels. Everything in it feels about 50% lighter than I expected. I mean, it's all just very simple, a little bit spongy, but very accessible as a result. There's nothing hardcore about the feel of the Miata, nothing at all, in fact. And considering its racing pedigree and the fact that this car will be raced too, I kind of expected a little bit of an edge. There's no edge at all. It's entirely rounded off. That doesn't make it bad in any way. It's just softer than you might expect when you think, I bought a sports car. There is a quite noticeable amount of body roll. Now, it's not sloppy. It's just quick transitions in this car. You have to anticipate the fact that it's going to float one way and then float the other. It's controlled, but it isn't taught. I find myself easing up every now and then, just a tiny bit in the corner, like, am I okay? And then I realize, no, you're fine, you're great. It's just not as focused a sensation as I was expecting from a car like this.
This car dances. It does. But it feels like it's wearing orthopedic shoes while it's doing it. If this car were wearing different shoes, and by that I mean everything from the chassis down to the road, suspension, a little bit different brakes, to the tires, everything there just feels compliant. It dances, it can keep up with you, kinda. Just feels soft, and that makes me feel disconnected.
What I like here is that this is so confidence-inspiring. I really want to push this car hard. I want to seek out the edges of it because it stays so flat and predictable in the corners. I know that Miata can hang on. I've felt it going fast in corners, but it doesn't instill as much confidence as this FRS does with its very flat chassis.
It's sort of like the MX-5 has become not soft in its old age, but but kind of. It's almost geared more towards a cruise rather than a hardcore drive. And I think a lot of people were expecting more of a hardcore, more focused sports car, when in fact the FRS and BRZ Twins take that.
I realized that the body roll was a choice by Mazda to make it this way. They talk about how they want the driver to feel the sensations of the car. Okay, I can feel the sensations of the car just fine when it's still rolling less.
I feel like this is where this car is supposed to shine. I wanted to think, what has Mazda wrought? What have they done? But it isn't there. You're gonna have to spend more money to make it do that. Is that okay? Some people want that. I don't. A little bit more kick, or a little bit firmer, or a little bit more driver focused, especially the launch edition. But it awaits. It awaits your recipe. It awaits what you want to do to it. That's where I'm at.
The cornering feel of the Miata kind of feels like an athlete past his prime. He's still really good, talented, can do everything he's always able to do, but just a stutter step behind and with a little bit less grace. The FRS feels like an athlete in its prime. Everything is very taut, everything is very controlled, sharp, and muscular. The Miata just feels like it's softened a bit, but it can still do it all. So as great as this matchup is, there is a fundamental problem.
Okay.
I already own this car. I've already put my money into this discussion and gone, this is the car I own. So no matter what I say, there will be those of you that'll be like, well, he already owns the FRS. Of course he likes it. He's biased.
Okay.
No matter what I say.
I can see that. You know what I hate is when journalists say, we've got the cars and we're here to find out something. Well, of course, we've found out much about this already.
Yes.
But now this has entered the picture. So the question is, despite the fact owning this, you bought it before this was actually available.
That's true.
So the question is, did you buy correctly?
I got the right car.
You did.
That's what I did. I got the right car.
That's funny, because I think you got the right car too.
Really? Because you're not
do.
a huge fan. I have to acknowledge, you're not a huge fan of the FRS.
And here's what I said in my interview.
Okay.
Jumping back into this car, I said, the FRS has what I was looking for in the MX-5. I like this car, but I love what this gives me, and it's that fizz, the delight, the excitement, the something little extra that, oh wow, I didn't know it could do that. But hang on, we have put different tires on this. We've only done a little bit of modding, just new rubber. Maybe it's because of the tires. We do have Chance's white BRZ with us,
yes, but
with the original size.
It's not just tires though.
It isn't. It isn't.
Because
I agree.
This is a softer car.
It adds to that though. It adds to that dynamic. And I thought, okay, I like that too, but with the good tires.
No question the FRS is a sharper car, and it's also a flatter, stiffer chassis.
Yes,
I personally prefer that, but that's not for everyone. I think Mazda has hit an interesting point of trying to hit a broad spectrum of drivers. I actually think if that Miata, as much as it's more aggressive looking, I think if it was more aggressively set up, I think fewer people would want it.
Well, yes, and you're exactly touching on the point I thought of in my interview here. These cars are similarly priced, but I noted a couple years ago when we first drove the FRS, this was 1.0.
Sure.
And we were expecting at some point Toyota and Subaru to come out with a supercharged, turbocharged, more hot, something else. And we've talked about that ad nauseum.
Yep.
The new 2016 car is also 1.0 with the new architecture, new everything.
Lighter, smaller, amazing.
All of that, but now it's a matter of, even if you get either for less used, you're still going to put yourself back up because of what you're going to do to it. You're going to want to make it this way, harder or softer or better or whatever. So even if you get it for 25 grand, Well, you're going to spend
You're gonna put
another
money in.
$5, and now
For
you're back
sure.
up to 30.
Yeah. And the problem is you could make either of these cars 30 grand, and at 30 grand, they're too expensive. At 25, they're incredibly tempting.
Now it's a deal.
And used, it's unbelievable. The MX-5 used to have this world to itself.
Yes.
And now this is the perfect competitor. And I think their personalities are different enough that you have to ask yourself, who are you as a driver? And I have to stay with my choice. I'm thrilled I have the FRS now that I've driven the MX-5.
So what did we find out? Everybody always tries to find out something. What did we find out
What's
here?
our grand conclusion?
What's the grand conclusion?
You're probably saying that we're wrong, but thanks for joining us anyway.
My first impression is that Mazda has left itself space. I'm sure that it has noticed everything going on with the FRS and BRZ because they've left themselves a lot of space to build on this car.
There are some people, no question, who are buying this looking for a hardcore vehicle. But you don't sell 1 million of these in 25 years by making a all hardcore car. This has got to appeal to a pretty broad audience, and I'm only one small part of it. And for me, it's not hardcore enough, but if you're looking for a car you can just drive and enjoy and capture the joy of driving, the MX-5 remains one of the best ever.
Funny enough, what I've said I'm looking for out of that new MX-5 is what I'm finding here in the FRS. But that's because of my proclivities. You have to drink, and you also have to listen to the podcast to get the joke.
This is your favorite roadway weapon. The MX-5 is your favorite pillow, and you want to take it everywhere.